My name is Alex Briseno, and I was born here in San Antonio back in 1949. It was a great experience growing up in San Antonio. A lot of things that I experienced growing up on the west side of San Antonio, I didn't know were a problem until I went to college and found out that we were living in poverty. But we never felt that way. My parents were focused on education, on all five of us, all five children in the family. Focused on education, providing for that, providing a good home for us, good food, clothing. They always took care of us. On the other hand, when it rained, it was time to put on your swimsuit and go out and swim in the street because the drainage was bad. But at that time, it was great, for us to go play in the street. Very fortunate to have a library a couple blocks away, and I remember one summer reading almost every book in that library because it was one of the few buildings in the west side that were air conditioned. And across the street was a fire station, and the Cub Scouts would go do the tour of the fire station, and so it really was a great experience. Made some good friends, and lifelong friends, and but also provided, as I grew up and went to college and graduate school and saw other parts of the country like Washington, D.C., realized that there were some needs there, and it provided a base for me to reflect on when I came back to work in the city, which my goal was to do something for my community. I was in the Army for 4 years. I spent 3 of those years in Washington, D.C., which was a very great opportunity for me to learn a lot being there in the Army. Got out of the Army in 1977 and came back home. There was an election in February of '77 to convert to single-member districts. Before that, the elections were at large as the city council. And so to do the mayor at large and single-member districts with 10 council members. Overnight, that election, first election was in April, I think it was, and the whole structure of the council turned over to being 6 minority and 5 non-minority. Tom Huebner, who had been the new city manager, had been brought in January, hired in January as city manager. And so he started recruiting for some folks, and I was urged to apply, and I did, and he considered me, and I think I brought something to the table. He was from out of town, and there was some rumbling about that, and I was a hometown boy, had a master's degree, and had been in the Army for 4 years. He had been in the Army too. So he connected, and he hired me. I started on July 5th of '77, just 5 days after I... It was interesting to see the transition on the city council and the challenges that occurred with the different council members trying to stake out different positions. All of them valid, all of them pertinent positions, articulating issues that needed to be articulated, that hadn't been raised well enough in the past. Some of it was a little bit, tough, tentative at best, but maybe negative in some ways. But again, creating that discussion environment of issues that need to be discussed and addressed. Part of that, the person who kind of rode herd on that and kind of managed that was Mayor Lila Cockrell. And she did a great job of keeping all those tensions and all those discussions managed, and really helped that transition that occurred over about 2 or 3 year period. And so I was 27 years old, and I never dreamed that I'd have that kind of job. I thought I was going to get a job as an administrative assistant, and was very excited about being selected in that position. I found myself supervising department heads who were 60 years old. And I think they always called me their liaison. They never saw me as a supervisor. But again, it was a great learning experience for me, working with all those executives. It was interesting. I often talk about this with my students. I teach at St. Mary's now, and I talk about part of that transition in terms of reflecting the community. When I walked into my first executive meeting, out of about 35 people there, they were all men, no women. There were 2 other Hispanics besides me and 2 African Americans, and that was it. And the whole Over time, that's changed, and I think you can see the dramatic changes that occurred in the past. Ultimately, for example, in 1990, I was selected as the first Hispanic or Latino city manager in San Antonio. And so that transition has continued with a number of positions, executive positions, that move forward. And I think that's important to reflect the community. We expanded the convention center, we expanded the airport, we did a number of bond projects, built the central library, got that done. And I guess you could see my name on plaques all over town. Dealt with some tough issues. We had, when I first became city manager, we had a property tax rollback election. And so property taxes rolled back. One of the first things I had to do is send letters to 470 employees saying, look for a job now because you're not going to have one in October. And so it was and I eliminated several executive positions, made a lot of changes. Ultimately, we turned that around. By 1995, Financial World magazine selected us as one of the top 10 best managed cities in the country. And so very proud of all those things. But I think the proudest thing for me was in the late 90s, we were doing a tax abatement program for the Westin Hotel downtown. And I got called into a meeting with community folks in the Cops Metro group. And they were saying, why are you giving property tax breaks to a company that they're just going to hire maids and bellhops? They're all going to be minimum wage. It's not, creating any real opportunities, just more poor people. And I said, you're right. And we're working on as a policy requiring companies in the future coming in with looking for tax abatements or benefits to provide a living wage for their employees. I said, well, let me ask you this. Why is it that you've never come in to me and say, why don't you provide a living wage to city employees? I said, we're talking about city employees who cut the grass in parks, who clean out the kennels in the dog pound, and pick up garbage. All those folks, and they're not new employees, they're your neighbors. They live in your neighborhoods, they go to your churches, their kids go to your kids' schools, and you never come to me and say, you need to pay them a living wage. And so they said, well, we're not here to talk about that. But what I was proudest of is in the coming months after that, I got the city council to approve a policy of paying a living wage. Today, you can see that in the $15 wage, minimum wage that they're paying to city employees. So city employees often do work that's taken for granted. I often say that people, when they walk out of their front door in the morning, they want to see a police car driving by, a fire station one end of the block, a library at the other, and a park across the street, and the garbage being picked up. And yes, that's going to happen one time or another during the day, but it's city employees who make that happen. For example, you wake up in the morning, take a shower, water comes out, goes down the drain. You don't say, oh, thank you, Sauce, for providing that water and taking care of that wastewater that goes down. But there's 120 million gallons a day of wastewater that goes down to the sewage treatment plant and gets treated and turned around so that some of it can be pumped back upstream to water golf courses and put water into the river and do other types of benefits. All that's public employees, city employees, because SAWS is owned by the city. But there are several countless examples like that. And so having a policy of paying those city employees a living wage, I think was probably the proudest day of my career. I think we virtually doubled the space. And this was back in the mid to late 90s. For example, one of the things we always talked about is having an exhibit hall that went from Alamo Street to the access road on I-37. So an 18-wheeler could drive into that exhibit hall, unload their stuff, and drive out the other end without having to back out or whatever. And so, plus, increasing the capacity for meetings. But you're right, it's an important part of our economy. If you look at the impact of visitor industry, number one, a lot of it is family visitors. It's not just business people or whatever. So it's families. So they're looking for other things to do and support other things like the zoo, like Fiesta Texas, SeaWorld, and those types of activities. But they also provide the base for demand, for example, for hotels. Now people say, okay, well that's all visitor industry. Well, the fact of the matter is hotels and other visitor-related industries like restaurants on the Riverwalk and all that provide jobs. Maybe in many cases they don't pay enough, but their jobs better than unemployment. But beyond that, they provide property values. And property values means more property taxes to the city, and those taxes help pay for paving streets, drainage ditches, or whatever. In addition to that, they provide sales tax revenues, and the city gets 1% of the sales tax, VIA gets 0.5%, and all that goes back to contributing, to the community's benefit. VIA provides the public transit that's so important in our community, and a lot of other cities have one. I'm speaking now as a past chairman of VIA, that a lot of other communities like Dallas and Austin, Houston have a full penny. VIA only has 0.5 cent. One of the things I used to do is take the bus downtown and go to the original main library, they call it at the time, and it was where the Briseno Museum is now. There's a little elephant in front. You always pat when you walked into the library. But it was relatively small. I think in the late 60s, early 70s, it was relocated to where the International Center is now, at the corner of St. Mary's Street and Market Street, and with a back onto the river. And that was the main library for a long time. In the late 80s, there was a bond election, a library bond election, that included funds for the new Central Library, plus 7 literacy centers around town. That kind of makes sense, literacy and libraries. And so that was approved by the voters, and ultimately construction was started in the early 90s, and it was completed around 93, 94, somewhere in there. In that process, they hired Legoretta, the architect, who came up with the design of the structure and the colors, and now it's called the Red Enchilada Red Library. But it staked its position there, and makes it an attractive, but also a welcoming facility. I often talk about when I again talk to my students about one of my experiences as city manager, and the goals of management is to hire great people, hire people who are smarter than you, and people who know what they're doing in their specific areas, and can do it better, and you can rely on their advice and their efforts. When we were building the Central Library, we were doing a great job. It was on time, on target, within budget. And I had the library director and the IT director come see me, and they said, "We need $2.3 million more." And I said, "Well, for what? We're under budget. We're fine. Why do you need $2.3 million more?" And they said, "Well, we need to, while we're building this, we need to pre-wire for the internet." And I said, "The internet? That's the military. Nobody does the internet." And they said, "No, we need to do it." Luckily, I relied on their advice, and we sold $2.3 million in certificates of obligation and pre-wired for the internet. Probably one of the first central libraries in the country. This was back in 1992. That was pre-wired for the internet. When we had that budget cutback based upon the property tax rollback, we had to do a number of things. And one of the things we looked at is trying to do cuts in the budget that made sense. And so at that time, the library system, all the central library and the branch libraries were, and that was before when the main library was over on the Riverwalk. The hours, for weekly hours, are 69 hours a week. And so we did an analysis and discovered the lowest attendance participation in the library system was on Friday nights, because it's pizza night and everybody has pizza at night. I'm being facetious. Saturday nights, because everybody goes dancing or go to the movies or something. And Sunday mornings, because everybody's going to church. And so we ended up cutting the library hours from 69 to 56 hours a week, but still not creating a huge reduction in services, because it didn't impact a lot of people. And my motto for years was gerencia con corazón, and that means management with a heart. Yes, you've got to have good, solid management, good financial analysis, be sure you get the work done and deliver the services, but also with a heart, with an understanding of what the needs are and how that goes in terms of setting priorities. Nowadays we talk about equity allocation of resources as opposed to equal. And for a long time, with the district team, it was okay, we're going to divide it by 10 and all that. But we did equity distribution of resources in the past based upon that motto. As an example, we didn't allocate a certain amount of money for street maintenance or for animal control or police protection based upon dividing it up. We would do, if there was a particular neighborhood that needed those kinds of issues, we'd send in like a SWAT team that included police and fire, code compliance, drainage maintenance, street maintenance, drainage maintenance, animal care services, all that at once, and do a sweep, a target team sweep in that neighborhood to just try to get it built up. And so the key there is trying to respond to the needs and do it in a professional, timely, and cost-effective way. Well, when the City Council passed an ethics ordinance back in 1991, they essentially said you could accept gifts for city employees and for the council members. They could accept gifts under $50, but over $50, it had to be disclosed on an annual basis. And so I had a reporter, I won't name him, but he was one of those investigative guys, come and interview me about this. And he spent like an hour interviewing me. They had to go out and get a new battery for a fresh battery for the camera. And he says, do you mean to tell me that if I give you a brand new pink Cadillac, that all you have to do is disclose it and it's okay? And I said, legally, yes. However, the city council should fire me for poor judgment. And so when he ran it that night, it was legally yes. And so a lot of challenges like that. But I think what pleases me most about being city manager is being able to work and do things for our community. I was born and raised here, and my only goal was to serve our community and to assemble a team of people that would be interested in doing that as well, or committed, to doing that as well. And I think we did a good job of that. I think, yes, there was a lot more that needed to be done. No doubt about it. There's a lot more today that needs to be done. But I think we set the basis for that. We had, in the last 4 or 5 years I was there in the late 90s, we had over 20,000 net new jobs a year that were created. Unemployment rate was 3.4%. I'm an economics major, and 4% is considered full employment. And so we were doing great in terms of the economy, and turned around the base that provided the property tax base, an example, for all these bond elections that we had since then. I think it's the values that I learned from my parents. And again, a lot of stories there about hard work and diligence, understanding others. When I was a kid, at Christmas we used to get, 2 gifts, one from Santa Claus and one from our parents, usually a toy or something from Santa Claus, and a shirt, pair of pants from parents. And so I really wanted the football stuff. And so the first year I got a football, second year I got shoulder pads and a jersey, third year I got a helmet, fourth year I got the pants, but the rest didn't fit by then. But at any rate, when I got that football, the day after Christmas I was out in the street with my cousin, again, no park close by, so we had to play in the street, kicking the football, and a tomatero came by, a tomato boy who sold produce door to door, carried a rack with different kinds of fruits and vegetables and sold them door to door. And he was about 12, 13 years old, and he wanted to play too. And so he played with us, and he kicked the football. Because he walked all day long, he had strong legs. He went all the way into Sarzamora Street, and a car came over and ran over it. And so my cousin said, there's a brand new football, Christmas, you need to pay for it, And so the kid had maybe, $1.40 in change and nickels and dimes and pennies, and he gave me that money, he left. When I got back upstairs, up to the porch in the house, my mother was there, and she said, that's okay for you. What was that about? And I told her what happened. She says, no, senor, in Spanish, but she said, you have everything you need. This boy has to work for his living. She made me sit in that front porch for 2 weeks till he came by again to give him his money back. And so those kinds of values, I think, form the basis for my principles and my career. I grew up on Monterrey Street, close to Zarzamora. Henry Cisneros grew up 4 blocks west of there. Lionel Sosa on Buena Vista and around the corner. Hope Andrade on, I guess at that time, it wasn't Saunders, it was Durango Street and around the corner. Ricardo Romo on Monterrey Street, about 5 blocks down to the east. And so that Prospect Hill neighborhood, provided a lot of talent and resources in the future. Study hard, work hard, but keep your principles as your basis. Don't let yourself be steamrolled in one direction or another. You may have to take a few hits and take the hits, but take them as learning experiences. But be committed to improving quality of life for you yourself, for your family, your neighborhood, for the community, and apply those skills that and attributes and qualities that you developed over the years in a positive, meaningful way.